Can Carlos Carrasco bounce back and be a legitimate number 3 starter for the Mets? Will Taijuan Walker be more of the first half version of himself from 2021 when he was an all-star, or the second half version that pitched to an ERA over 7? Today we will continue our season previews with Carlos Carrasco and Taijuan Walker on this edition of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing about the Mets at justbaseball.com. All right, so let's get into it. As we head towards spring training, the biggest question mark I feel right now among Mets fans is, what's the back end of their rotation going to look like? Because we know Max Scherzer and Jacob deGrom are going to be an elite 1-2 punch. I mean, arguably the best two pitchers in baseball. But behind them, just a lot of question marks. And we're going to begin with Taijuan Walker here. And what we're doing as we are previewing the upcoming season, we did it last week with David Peterson and Tyler McGill. I am going through the Fangraphs projections for these pitchers. Then we're kind of talking about their last season and what to project for them moving forward based on what the advanced models are telling us, and also based on the eye test and what we just think of these players when it comes to what they can produce next season. When it comes to these 6 projection models for Taijuan Walker at Fangraphs, they have him between 25 and 29 starts and between 132 and 166 innings pitched. The ERA between 4.43 and 4.67. This past year, he made 29 starts, pitched 159 innings, and had a 4.47 ERA. So that's right in the middle of all the projection models. They basically are saying it's going to be the same thing again next season. And if you look at that as a composite, right? If Taijuan Walker were to pitch to a 4.5-ish ERA and make 29 starts for you as your number 4 starter, that would not be the end of the world for the Mets, especially if the top 3 perform the way they can. If Carrasco had a huge bounce back and Scherzer and deGrom were healthy, you could accept that. The problem is there's question marks when it comes to injuries with deGrom and Carrasco. Max Scherzer is much closer to 40 than 30, and you don't really know who the 5th starter is going to be yet. So unless the Mets make an addition that we don't foresee yet, like they make a big trade and get Luis Castillo, that puts a lot of pressure on Taijuan Walker to be closer to that all-star version of himself than the second half version. And really, it was a tale of 2 seasons for Taijuan. He had a 2.66 ERA at the All-Star break, a 7.13 ERA after the All-Star break. You look at the 17 starts before the All-Star break, 10 of them, he goes at least 5 innings and allows 2 runs or less. And he also completed 7 innings 5 times, gave the Mets a lot of length as well. You look at the 13 starts after the All-Star break, only 4 of them did he go at least 5 and give up 2 runs or less. Gave up a ton of runs, gave up a ton of home runs, 20 home runs in 64 to third innings pitched. That is a home run per 9 rate of 2.8. You're not going to beat very many teams if you're giving up 3 home runs a game. And you're talking about a home run per 9 of 2.8. If he's only going 5 innings in a start, then you can do the math there. That is a lot of home runs. He was just getting torched in that second half. What you could say about it is he did have to go to the All-Star game, which I actually think was bad for him. I mean, good for his career, good to get that recognition. But I think it was bad because I think he needed that break. He needed some time. I think his arm got really tired down the stretch. This is a pitcher that was coming off Tommy John surgery in 2020, has the shortened season, so he doesn't get to really ramp up his innings much. And then he comes out this year and throws 159 innings, which is great. And I think the interesting aspect about Walker is that he is a pitcher that does have that Tommy John in his past, and now he's on the other side of it. So I really think that when it comes to who you can project to take the ball every 5th day, Taijuan Walker might be number 2 in this rotation just as far as availability. I mean, Scherzer has been a workhorse his entire career, and I think Walker might actually be right behind him when it comes to what you're expecting out of him as far as just taking the ball. But if he's going out there and he's getting knocked around and getting pushed out of the game in 4 innings, he's not going to give you a ton of innings. He's not giving you a ton of quality innings. So there's a lot of question marks with Taijuan Walker. And the more I look at the numbers, the less confident I am. From watching the eye test on Taijuan Walker, you see certain starts where it all clicks. I mean, this is a former top prospect, top draft pick, a guy that had that pedigree of being elite, being in the futures game. He was always supposed to be a frontline starter, and it never quite came together for him. And at times, when he was an all-star in the first half, he'd have those starts where he'd strike out 8 guys in 5 innings and keep the other team off the board. Or, he would do so many things as far as, just the defense on the mound was outstanding as well. I mean, I thought he should have been in consideration for a gold glove. He was not, but I really liked what I was seeing in the first half. And then a couple of things happened that I don't know what to take from it. But one of the things that I feel like could have affected Taiwan Walker, and this is pure speculation, but it did seem like there was a little bit more dominance in the early part of the season before the sticky substance ban. Now, take that for what it's worth. Again, this is just speculation. There was a couple of guys that did just seem to jump out that there was a little bit of a dip in stuff on the Mets, like Miguel Castro, as I said, Walker, Sean Reed Foley. These are some guys where when that switch was made, you had to scratch your head a little bit. Now he still had some great starts after the ban, and that could have been nothing. But you look at his spin rates in general, and is not one of the best pitchers in baseball when it comes to that. He doesn't spin the ball well. The advanced metrics are really bad on him across the board this past season. He wasn't missing barrels. Guys weren't chasing. He was getting hit hard. His strikeout percentage and walk percentages were both below average. That's not great. And he has 5 pitches that he can mix up, but none of them were plus pitches last year. So that, again, doesn't inspire much confidence, especially his fastball, which just got torched. I mean, batters hit with a 469 slugging percentage against that fastball, 14 home runs against the fastball. I don't know what variations he can put on that pitch, how he can locate it better, not letting it get out over the heart of the plate as much. I still think that Taijuan Walker can put it all together and be a really good starter for the Mets, but I feel a lot more comfortable with Taijuan Walker was the Mets' 5th starter instead of their 4th starter. I do think that because Scherzer and DeGrom are so great, they can get by with not having the most elite starters behind them. I think in a recent, or not a recent, probably about I think it was probably when the Mets got Scherzer that I discussed this, but I did have a podcast where I made the comp of Scherzer DeGrom to Schilling Johnson, with the Diamondbacks back in the day. And the rotation behind Randy Johnson and Kurt Schilling was, I mean, nothing to write home about. There was really no other pitcher in that rotation that had an ERA that was even sub 4.5. So if he pitches to projections and Taijuan Walker gives you a 4.5 ERA and makes 29 starts, the availability alone will be solid. But I think what you can't have is a season like the one he just put together as far as the drastic splits, because Taijuan Walker hurt the Mets so much last season in the second half. As much as he helped them in the first half, he was such a detriment in the second half. And you can't really go into a stretch playoff run and have a guy in your rotation every 5th day pitching to an ERA over 7. So if he can be more consistently average as opposed to being great than terrible, I think that'll be good for the Mets. And again, there is a chance that Taijuan Walker, now even further removed from Tommy John, can continue to figure out. We saw that with Zach Wheeler. He's gotten better and better each year removed from Tommy John. I would not write Walker off, but from what we have seen, from what the data tells us, you just can't be extremely confident that Taijuan Walker is going to be an all-star again, or even be a pitcher that can pitch to a sub-4 ERA, which is what you would really hope for if the Mets are going to reach the loftiest of their expectations. But all of that puts even more pressure on Carlos Carrasco to be excellent next year, something that I have a lot more confidence in, and I'll share why in just a minute. This is the time of year where in the past, I might have just given up on my New Year's resolutions, but this year, I'm sticking to my resolution to eat right, thanks to Built Bar. And honestly, it really doesn't even feel like a resolution anymore because I actually really enjoy eating them. It's like saying, hey, that candy bar you eat every day is good for you. That's what it's like when you're eating Built Bars. These are protein bars that really do taste like candy bars because they come covered in 100% real chocolate. There's so many different flavors to choose from, whether it's the mint brownie, coconut almond, and new this month, the white chocolate cookies and cream. I've already tore through a whole box of them. I'm waiting for my next one in the mail. That is how good they are. You'll want to try them as well. So go to built.com to try out the new white chocolate cookies and cream or any of their other great flavors. And once you're there, make sure you use the promo code LOCK15 to get 15% off your next order. Again, that's promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at built.com. This episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto store to stock all the parts you need. So why endure the pointless and seemingly intimidating questioning and wait while that person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing the only brand their warehouse happens to carry, when instead you can go on your computer or your mobile device to rockauto.com and shop for whatever you need and save 30%, 50%, maybe even 100% more for the exact same auto parts you'd be getting at a chain store or car dealership. RockAuto.com is a family business that's been serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. They have prices that are reliably low for every customer, so go explore their easy-to-use website today to find the solution to your auto parts needs. Go to rockauto.com right now, see all the parts available for your car or truck. Make sure you write Locked On in there. How'd you hear about us box so they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. RockAuto.com. Coming off the season where Taijuan Walker made just 12 starts, didn't throw a lot of innings, the projections on him vary greatly. If you go to Fangraphs and there's 6 projection models, it ranges between 26 and 15 starts, 140 innings and 81 innings. The ERAs are all over the place between 4 and 504, but there are some projection models that do favor favor Carrasco. Not many of those models were kind to Taijuan Walker. Zips DC had Carlos Carrasco making 26 starts, pitching 140 innings, and pitching to a 4.0 ERA. Zips had him at a 4 ERA, but only making 15 starts and pitching 81 innings. So again, there is a big element of the unknown with Carlos Carrasco because of that season he just had. But you look at 2020. This was prior to coming to the Mets. His last year in Cleveland in the shortened season, he made every start, made 12 starts, had a 2.91 ERA. All the advanced metrics were very, very kind to Carrasco that year. This year, not so much, but I've said it a million times. I mean, you take the context of this season into account for Carrasco. He blows out his hammy in spring training, doesn't have that normal season he's used to, comes back after the All-Star break to a team that's floundering with this pressure to take over for the greatest pitcher on the planet in Jacob deGrom and be the Mets' new ace or just something to account for the loss of the GOAT. A little bit hard to deal with that pressure, especially when you're only throwing an inning at a time at the beginning. And he had all of those starts where he just got lit up in the first inning where he was trying to get into a rhythm. And I just don't think that we can take much from the season. Yes, he had a 6.04 ERA. No, he did not look good. But there's a couple things to like about his season last year, and that's that the spin rate on his breaking balls was still in the 86th percentile among the top 15% of pitchers in baseball. The chase rate was in the 83rd percentile. So that's like top 17%. So you look at what he was able to do even in a bad year, this stuff was not bad. The difference between Carrasco and Walker is Carrasco just has better stuff and has had better stuff throughout his career, even in, arguably his worst season. The slider and the changeup each had whiff percentages over 30%. Batters were still struggling to see those pitches. Now, his fastball got hit hard. In general, he missed with those pitches at times. The breaking stuff out over the heart of the plate, gave up home runs. There was concerns, but I look at who this guy has been throughout his career. The fact that he still has nasty pitches, the fact that the stuff hasn't really dipped, the advanced metrics from 2020, and again, who he was throughout his career. I've talked about this before, but you go from 2020 through 2020 or 2004. I said 2020 through 20. I might have said 2020 through 2020. If you go from 2014 through 2020, which was the prime of his career when he solidified himself in that rotation out in Cleveland. You look at the XFIP leaders, which is expected fielding independent pitching. Just a statistic that's supposed to give you a better understanding of what a player's ERA should be as opposed to what it ended up being. It's supposed to limit all the other factors and just focus in on the expected pitching performance. You look at pitchers with a minimum of 500 innings, so your starting pitchers across that span. It's Clayton Kershaw 267. It's Chris Sale at 284. It's Jacob DeGrom at 291. And it was Carlos Carrasco at 305. Throughout his career, if you look at the numbers, he has easily been a top 15 starting pitcher in baseball and never has had the PR to have matched his production. Like, people have always undervalued Carlos Carrasco, and it's happening again because of his terrible season. And that's fair to be pessimistic. I'm not all in on Carlos Carrasco, but I'm a lot more all in than I'm all out on him because I look at the sample size of his career and I just don't think he's fallen off to the point where he can't still be successful. Yes, he's in his mid 30s, but we're at a point in the game where you see a lot of pitchers thriving in their mid 30s. And you look at the velocity, look at the spin rate, a pitcher that relies on that slider to just break a ton, the changeup to break a ton. And those pitchers are still moving. So if he has a normal offseason, he had his elbow cleaned up a bit, had a bone fragment in that pitching elbow that had to get removed after the season. Another thing that was never talked about. He still went out, took the ball every fifth day. He's a great clubhouse guy as well. So I think his presence for a full season will help the Mets alone in that clubhouse. But also, I think the performance can get there. I really do. He had a healthy offseason. If he can be healthy in spring training, get ramped up properly, which is, of course, the whole lockout element of this could factor into that. But assuming he can get his arm into normal shape, which he had so many years in Cleveland, I expect him to be that guy again. And that guy is very capable of pitching to a 3.5 ERA. And as your number 3 starter with the 2 aces the Mets have above him, that is going to be enough right there to give the Mets a really potent starting rotation, regardless of who's taking the ball the other 2 days, right? The fourth and the fifth starters. But Carlos Carrasco is really, in my opinion, the X factor of this starting rotation, because when projecting out the season, am projecting a healthy DeGrom and Scherzer. And with that, I don't think there's really questions about what they're going to do. Carrasco, there is a lot of questions, but I think he can answer those questions and be a really great number 3 starter for the Mets this season. I'm not out on him at all. So that's where I stand with him. But the composite, what will the two of them bring to the Mets? What do the Mets need from Carrasco and Walker? And who do they have to add to complement them? I'll talk about that a bit more in just a minute. There might be less football being played, but BetOnline.net has way more stuff to bet on this playoff season, from scores, totals, player performance props, to where the next fire coach is going to land. BetOnline is the number 1 spot for all things NFL betting in 22, but it's not just about football. Now that the NFL season is over, our attention can be turned to basketball, hockey, boxing, and UFC odds coverage, and BetOnline.net is the best in the business. From sports right down to your favorite Vegas casino games, BetOnline is your number 1 online wagering destination. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to wager on all your favorite sports and play your favorite games. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, so what can we expect from Carrasco and Walker as a duo? We did this last week with Peterson and McGill, and I talked about, the two of them maybe making 33 starts this year. What would that look like? How could they hold up? With Carrasco and Walker, I think the hope is they'd make 50 starts for you, right? And the hope would be that they're going to go out and be the best versions of themselves. And, if they're completely right, there is that potential still, and it would be just everything breaking for the Mets, where they're just living in a perfect world. If everyone's healthy, everyone performs up to their ceiling, and you have 4 guys who are capable of pitching at an all-star level, 2 guys capable of pitching at a Cy Young level. With that said, I don't expect that out of Walker, and I don't necessarily expect Carlos Carrasco to pitch like an all-star, but I expect Carlos Carrasco to have a really nice season, and I think Walker can be not the first half version, not the second half version of himself, but I would just hope for some consistency. If he can consistently go out and 2 out of every 3 starts, he gives you a chance to win, you take it. That's where I'm at with him. And when it comes to that last spot, if it's Peterson or McGill, again, that rotation's thin, but there's still this notion the Mets might add more. And we've talked about it throughout the offseason. You can go through the podcast feed and see a bunch of episodes where I've discussed this problem. Who do you add? And because we spent so much time talking about it, I continue to come back to Zach Greinke. And the reason I come back to Zach Greinke is because I think that he is the most durable option that's available, where he's going to slide right into a rotation, take the ball every fifth day, contribute in a lot of ways off the field as well. And he's just less of a question mark. I would look at him, Carrasco and Walker, and put them all in the same boat. And I would just think that Zach Greinke is not going to be bad. Whereas Carrasco and Walker, I think there is still a greater percentage chance that they might be. And I also think Greinke will be more available. With that said, your 3 through 5 could be a little bit uninspiring if it is Greinke, Carrasco, and Walker, especially as I just dove more into those advanced metrics. And again, when it came to Taijuan Walker and those numbers, they don't project him very kindly to have a great season and to be a pitcher that can get guys out at an elite rate. He's a guy that's going to have to pitch to contact, and hopefully the Mets defense behind him is great. But it's tough to see Taijuan Walker be that elite guy. But if you got Greinke, what it does for me is it just answers a lot of questions early. You go into the season, and then if you have to make a big trade for a starting pitcher in this season, you do that. I'm just hesitant to make that move right now to trade for Luis Castillo at the other end of this lockout and to maybe give up on a player like Jeff McNeil that I think could help the Mets a lot more this season. I also think he could be a player that could really boost his value a lot before a trade deadline anyway. Whereas, if the chemistry or whatever wasn't working out still with Jeff McNeil, maybe at the deadline you get a little bit more if you have to move him or if you have to get a starter. But I think the move right now should be signing Zach Greinke, or I guess another starter that can fill the void of a Rich Hill, just a veteran starter that can come in and take the ball. And then I think you see what you have in Carrasco and Walker. You see if Jacob deGrom is healthy, and then you adjust accordingly with what you have to add. If you have to go out and get a mid-tier starter, you do that. If you have to go out and get, a different lefty starter, if you want to add that to your rotation, you do that. Or if you have to go all in and get a high ceiling frontline starter and trade a big package of prospects and MLB players, you do that. But I would do that in season, not prior. Anyway, though, that's going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. On tomorrow's show, we got to the big guns when it comes to the season preview. Max Scherzer and Jacob deGrom will be talking about what they will do for the Mets in 2022. But as always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On Bets, hosted by your boy Q and handicapping expert Lee Sterling. Locked On Bets is where you want to go for all your daily gambling needs. You follow Locked On Bets wherever you get podcasts.